and welcome to Dragon Bites, the paediatric podcast aimed at paediatric trainees or anyone interested in child health. This week is the second of our field reports from the recent St David's Day conference, which took place on the 27th of February. If you didn't listen to the first podcast around this, the conference happens every year around St David's Day. The conference is a collaboration of the Welsh Paediatric Society and the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, with a different theme each year. This year it was Child Health Promotion, with the broad aim to provide updates on the state of child health in the UK, as well as introduce current interventions and strategies in Wales. This episode includes an amazingly enlightening interview with Chris van Tulleken about the influence of the formula industry on medicine and what we can do as professionals to stop this. And Hannah Davies, one of our new presenters of Dragon Bites, spreading the Welsh paediatric love with an insight into behind the scenes of this year's PAFTAs. Let's get started.
Hi everyone, it's Atom again. So let's just get back into the interview, shall we? First up this week, we have an interview with Dr Chris van Tulleken, Infectious Diseases Doctor at UCLH and leading science presenter for the BBC. Stacey and I caught up with him towards the end of the day to discuss the talk he'd given on the influence of the formula industry on health promotion. Chris might be one of the most genuinely lovely people we'd ever met. He even managed to tolerate our amateur approach to interviews, so he, like most of our guests, must have an infinite amount of patience. So we're here now with Dr Chris van Tulleken. So he is infectious disease doctor at UCLH and also super famous all over everywhere too. And you came into the St David's conference to give us a talk about the influence of the pharmaceutical industry on healthcare.
And the infant formula industry, probably more. Yeah.
So, hi.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Oh, brilliant. Could you tell us a bit about your findings and because it was I don't want to get too in depth as to because your talk's fascinating. I'd love people to see it firsthand. But what did you find?
So it started out while I was making a program called The Doctor Who Gave Up Drugs about areas of medicine where we suspected there was some overdiagnosis. And I went to a meeting to find out about cow's milk protein allergy. And the meeting was sponsored. It was on an NHS trust, but it was sponsored by Danone. And as we investigated, we realised that in the area of cow's milk allergy, whether or not we're talking about infants who are breastfed or infants who are on formula, every single layer of that area is funded by industry, by the industry that makes the products that we use to treat cow's milk allergy. So whether it's the patient information, the online information, the social media campaigns on Facebook, whether it's the research studies from the lab, whether it's the charities or the institutions like the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, thankfully, who now no longer accept any money. Every single stakeholder was accepting money in fairly large quantities from industry.
It's mad to think that's how much every element of aspect of this has been penetrated.
So I think there are two things. So I did this as an investigation for the BMJ, and the complicated thing is that saying there are widespread conflicts of interest is less interesting than being able to say these conflicts do harm. And so there were a few. What we had to do in the investigation was demonstrate the conflicts, uncover them, and then show that they do influence guidelines. So there is a vast number of guidelines to manage this condition, which just shouldn't need loads of guidelines. And they're all, either the authors are funded or the guidelines themselves are funded by industry. And so what we were able to show was that the guidelines do appear to be influenced. They're not giving the best advice. And particularly, I think, the area where we suspect there's a lot of harm is where women are exclusively breastfeeding the child. There is this idea that children can be allergic to their mother's breast milk. And I think the evidence for that is the published evidence is extremely thin. There is virtually no robust published data. There are some people I trust who say they've seen it clinically, but what there isn't is enough data to justify this immense public information campaign where women who are exclusively breastfeeding are advised to have severe dietary restrictions to treat common infant symptoms.
And it's a stonking amount of clinical work. I mean, it's probably a daily presentation from a paediatric perspective. The child that's coming in is a query, cow's milk protein allergy, and then all the amount of money that we probably end up spending on trying to treat something that might not actually be present to begin with, because we're working off guidelines that are perhaps built on the shakiest of foundations.
Well, I think the crucial thing about the guidelines is if we look at the most common guideline used in this country, the MAP guideline, the diagnostic criteria are so broad as to include every single child, really. Loose or solid stools, frequency or constipation, crying, irritability, perianal redness. I mean, these are just virtually near universal in children. And so these are not guidelines that have been written really with an eye to excluding a diagnosis, to a diagnosis that can carry significant harm to mother and to child. If the mother wants to breastfeed and she feels unable to because common symptoms she feels are being caused by an allergy to her milk, that can be really harmful to mother and child.
Absolutely. I think, just bouncing off something else that you mentioned in your talk, and I think to mention earlier, just in case a lay person is listening into this talk, the pharmaceutical industry has seemed to have, from what you were mentioning, found a way to blur the boundary between any evidence or criticism of their practices and criticising the mums for bottle feeding, if perhaps that's an appropriate option for them. And by blurring that, you can often become a victim of not become a victim, but mothers might well take offence to it in a way that it wasn't intended. So just in case there are lay people listening to this, it's probably worth clarifying.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for me to be very clear about this. So patient shaming is something that, whether it's pill shaming or infant food shaming, this is something we see the industry is very, very clever at hijacking.
Yeah.
So when we critique antidepressants, for example, patients who feel they get a benefit feel themselves criticised. And it's really hard to find forms of language where we can critique data, we can critique treatments without the patients who feel like they're getting a benefit or feel like they rely on those treatments feeling criticised or shamed themselves. And so we have to work really hard at that. And I think particularly in infant feeding, I've got a small child. It was a really big struggle, even for me as the father, but particularly for Dinah and Lyra, for them to engage in breastfeeding was very difficult and challenging for both of them. And that's a relationship that's very easily exploited. And so my point would be, I don't care how anyone feeds their child. Within bounds of safety, the vast majority of parents will do what's best. And there are plenty of economic reasons, biological reasons, social reasons why it may be best for some people to use formula. What I do feel is that the information that parents and clinicians get and give is not provided by people with a profit incentive when it comes to giving that information. So the information we give needs to be independent from the people who make the money.
Yeah, which is, I think it's a really important thing for us to do. I don't know practically how easy it is to do that. Often boundaries do get blurred when.
Don't you? So I feel it's really practically extremely easy. So people will say, there isn't enough money. Well, you know what, as long as you accept money from industry, you're doing two things. First of all, you're generating advertorial. You're not generating research data, really. And the second thing is you are acting as a reputational laundromat. So nothing is better for the industry than to be linked to the prestigious professional associations in the UK. And it makes life nightmarishly difficult for low-income countries if institutions like the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health are accepting money from the formula industry in violation of the WHO code that many low-income countries are really trying to follow. So I think it's very easy, actually, as healthcare professionals. As doctors, we make money. You know what? We can buy our own sandwiches. We can give lectures for free. In my institution and in my area generally, we have almost no industry funding for local meetings, education days. It would be unthinkable to have an infection day where we have world-class people coming speaking to us, to trainees. It would be impossible to imagine that we would have pharmaceutical or formula funding. I mean, we wouldn't have formula.
No, hey?
Yeah. Just say no. It's really straightforward. And when you say no, all kinds of good things happen. You know, money appears from elsewhere.
Yeah.
The Medical Research Council, the Wellcome Trust, the NHS, there are pots of money. But you'll never go looking for that money as long as you're getting it from industry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I should probably clarify what I was saying. I would be really.
Who's paying you?
No.
Who's funding this podcast?
What I was trying to say was it's really difficult to find a way to word critique of industry in a way that doesn't seem like a critique of the patients. That was the part that I thought was really, I've always struggled to do that in a way where patients don't feel victimized when you're saying actually there are valid things that are wrong with some of the treatments, or not even necessarily treatments that are out there.
I think that's right, and I think historically the people who have done so much to push anti-industry messaging around breastfeeding have often not found kindness and compassion for mothers who one of the problems is many women feel that they chose to formula feed, and in fact they were the victim of extremely sophisticated marketing efforts by industry. So you're not really choosing to formula feed when behind your back, excuse me, I should say I'm drinking a small quantity of champagne throughout this podcast, which is slightly strange, but anyways, I'm being very nicely treated here, so I'm belching. It's all very Operation Ouch. So when midwives or healthcare staff in hospitals are giving formula without maternal consent, it's little wonder then that women feel they're unable, that the infants have a reduced appetite, the reflexes aren't stimulated, milk supply dries up. Those mothers may feel they have chosen to use formula, whereas in fact an environment of promoting formula in general has prevented them doing it. Yeah. And so I think all of us admitting as clinicians and as patients how vulnerable we are to exploitation, we need to remove the stigma from that. And with smokers now, I think it's possible to critique smoking, and smokers understand that they are victims. They are not choosing. They're not colluding with industry. They are the victims of industry. And we also know that once people understand how industry, whatever the industry is manipulating them, it makes it much easier for them to disengage. And so I think messages around the quite well-evidenced harms that the global formula industry has done to women and children around the world over the last several decades. I mean, this is in the academic literature and in the popular press. Those messages being shared make it easier for women, I think, to engage with the idea that they maybe have more agency over this choice than they think, but they have to understand they are being manipulated.
Absolutely.
I wanted to thank you so much for getting this out there. Like I said,
well,
to you earlier,
I should say there are a huge number of people who have over many decades got this out there. So my name's on the paper, but there are a lot of contributors.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I suppose this has opened my eyes to, like you said, the sophisticated methods that industry go to influence medicine. So what, on a practical note, as a doctor, how can we sort of put a stop to this?
Okay, so that's a great question. Can I first, the thing I don't think I explained clearly was when we talk about sophistication, I guess that the thing that if people can't be bothered to come to one of my talks, the sophisticated thing is organising guidelines to create a fear of breast milk as a potential allergen in order to possibly reduce breastfeeding rates and promote the sales of both expensive formulas and hydrolyzed formulas and normal formulas. And that's the sophisticated kind of Trojan horse aspect. It's rebranding breast milk through the heavy promotion of a very poorly evidenced diagnosis. So that for me is the way they are sophisticated. How do we do it? I mean, I think the close reading of evidence is important, but it's hard. We don't have time. I think supporting our professional institutions to disengage from sponsorship, particularly the BDA, the RCGP, the RCPCH has done it already, particularly with formula, campaigning about journals and getting our microethics right. So anyone listening to this will find that they will be going to, if you're going to an allergy conference, there is every likelihood it will be sponsored by the makers of infant formula, and I would not go to those conferences. I would organise your own local conferences, and if you phone those speakers, they will come and speak to you in your hospital. I do it about in my own area of expertise, and speakers are very happy. Cover their rail fare and give them a sandwich, and they'll come and do it. We don't need big fees, and I think creating a very gentle culture of shame around accepting money from industry. If you want to make a load of money, take your medical degree and go and work for someone else. But if you're working within the NHS, I think you have implicitly signed up to the WHO code, and you are, if you are collaborating in conflicts of interest with the formula industry, you are, I think you are in violation of implied codes that you have signed up to.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Bit of a doubt. I mean,
no.
I don't want a paediatrician shame either, because
I think a lot of it is innocently done without realising the
100%.
Yeah.
And I remember that at medical school. I ate a huge number of sandwiches, and I'm certain they were having no influence. Most of us think we can go to the Abbott-sponsored meeting or Danone-sponsored meeting or Glaxo-sponsored, and it's not going to influence our practice, but we have very robust data to show that it will. That's why we've banned pens and pads of paper, is because biros or ballpoint pens and mugs do influence the way we prescribe.
It's difficult though, isn't it? Even when the very guidelines that you use are corrupt, it's a hard industry.
I think it's going to be an uphill struggle, but I think we just need to keep progressing with this sort of work and covering it really, and exposing it and saying no and doing something about it, isn't it?
I don't want to take up too much of your time, Chris. You've already
it's a real pleasure speaking to you, and I'm very happy to get these messages out, and I'm very happy to be wrong about it. I think there are a lot of very good people who take money from industry, and I disagree with them doing it, but I'm always happy to have a discussion.
Cool. I'm not one of them. I should point this out from earlier.
I know, I have no conflicts of interest either, really. I really
Other
don't.
than trying to promote my own brand of podcast. I've got a conflict of interest there. Right, thank you very much.
Good, it's a real pleasure.
Cheers. Finally, today we have an interview with Hannah Davies, the PAFTA Lead for Wales. For those of you unfamiliar with PAFTAs, they're the Paediatric Awards for Training Achievements. They're held in every deanery across the country, and Hannah was in charge of the Welsh ones. This is the first time Wales hosted such a large PAFTA ceremony, and Hannah was one of the main driving forces behind that. Stacey and I caught up with her about organising the award ceremony. Hannah, by the way, is also going to be joining us on the Dragon Bites team, so look forward to episodes from her in the future. So, I'm Asim, and we've got
Stacey.
And who are we here with?
Hannah.
Hannah's not only one of our new presenters at Dragon Bites, who's going to be joining us soon.
Exciting.
But also you're heading up the PAFTAs this evening.
I am. I've had the privilege this year. Yeah, I'm really excited.
We're doing something completely different with the PAFTAs this year. Can you tell us a bit about what's happening?
Yeah, so we've done it last year in the Wales Deanery, but we had the first 3 nominations for consultant, ST 1 to 3 and then ST 4 to 8.
Yeah.
This year we've expanded it much further and we've got a total of 10 categories.
Yeah.
And it takes a much more MDT approach and includes everybody who's involved in paediatrics rather than just the doctors. So I'm excited.
That's pretty cool. And there was you did something pretty special with the way we selected who the winners were this year as well.
Yeah, so I decided that we, it's quite limited sometimes how we get some of the votes in. So what I decided to do is to do a Survey Monkey, and we did an all Wales approach. So we've surveyed all the doctors and made it available to everybody. And they've basically nominated their favourite person for each category. So it gives us a really good view of and spread of all the amazing positive things that people do all over Wales, not just in certain sectors.
I did get an email from you. I'm pretty sure Stacey must have got an email from you.
I did.
Even if you get nominated, you get an email.
Yeah, so I thought it was really important. Like with awards, mainly you only hear about things if you actually win it. But I thought it was really important to value everybody's little contributions that they make on a day-to-day basis. So I decided that any nomination meant that you got a nominee certificate. So
I'm just wondering there behind
Stacey's
you. I'm just
yeah, because I think it's those little day-to-day things that get forgotten, but they're actually the biggest things that make a big impact on everybody's day-to-day functioning on the wards and their overall well-being and feeling valued. So I wanted to really emphasise that.
I had I don't know if this was the same as you, Stacey, but I had nurses and an EMP come up to me afterwards, and just it blew their mind that they'd had this email out of nowhere.
So I've heard a few people say that, and it's made me so happy. And it's like really, emphasise why I wanted to get involved and just spread the love basically amongst the Wales Deanery family, and just say, every contribution counts, and we wouldn't be where we are today without everybody involved.
I'm hijacking the entire interview. Sorry, Stacey.
It's fine. No, sorry. I just think it's wonderful, really. So how many nominations have you had about?
So we had 80 nominations in total, which have come back, and everybody nominated for 10 categories. And we hope to next year include an MTI award as well, which takes into consideration the doctors that help us who aren't necessarily on the training programme, because I think they make up a vital part of the Wales rotas, and I think it's important they don't get forgotten.
That was tried this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was attempted, but it didn't come to fruition. So we'll make extra special effort next year and get it on the main survey panel. So really excited about progress in the PAFTAs as well.
So who's won?
I can't tell you that. It's a surprise for this evening.
10 different categories here.
There are 10 categories, and everybody's going to get a certificate and presented, and I'm sure you'll see it all on, you'll get the update verbally on here, and you'll get hopefully the Panopto video as well. So everybody can see how amazing we all are.
I literally can't wait.
I think you've done such a fantastic job. I feel like that sounds patronising, but I genuinely think it's been a fantastic
Thanks
job.
so much. Well, I'd like to say...
She hasn't actually presented it.
That's true.
Yeah, no, it could all go very wrong. But I'd like to say as well what a massive, amazing achievement you two have gone with this Dragon Bite.
Oh God, let's cut this off now.
No, I'm not cutting this off because it needs to be said. It's really taken off. It's being internationally recognised with Don't Forget the Bubbles, etc. So I just want to give you two an amazing thumbs up and thank you for raising the profile of Wales paediatrics.
You know that's going to end up on the editing room floor.
It better not
It's too embarrassing.
It better not do.
Oh, thanks, Hannah.
Thank you very much, and keep up the good work, everybody.
Wow, thank you both so much. Join us next week for interviews with Aisling Beecher, the editor for the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health's Milestone magazine, Dr Matthew Snape, Associate Professor in Paediatrics and Vaccinology, and Dr Jennifer Evans, Consultant Paediatrician with an interest in infectious diseases from the University Hospital for Wales.